All right, let's jump to the early game. Started slow, Eric, down in Houston, but then the Texans caught fire. They raced past the LA Chargers 32-12. And it's been a minute since we've seen the switch turn on for the Houston Texans, because early in this game, the Chargers jump out to a 6-0 lead, and that looked like it might be enough to win. Like it looked like 6 points might be all LA would need the way Houston started. And then CJ Stroud has a high snap over his head. Looked like it's going to be a disaster for the Houston Texans. He picks it up, fires a 34-yard gain to Xavier Hutchinson. And from that point on, it felt like that was all she wrote. Like it never felt like the Chargers were able to stem that tide of momentum. And the Texans outscored the Chargers all the way from 32-6 from there.
Yeah.
What was it about that wave of momentum? It just felt like it never let up for LA.
For me, watching it and watching CJ, it just seemed like he played free. Like he wasn't worried about, whether he's going to turn the ball over, and he was just out there making plays within the rhythm of the game. And that was cool to see, because I think early on in the season, he had been playing, like the rookie of the year that he was last year. And then, they struggled to protect him. Obviously, that was part of it as well. But I just think he was just out there throwing the football to the guys that were open, trying to complete passes. They did a good job of completing passes over the middle of the field. I think, according to Next Gen Stats, he was 13-16 for over 200 yards over the middle of the field on in-breaking routes. And so that seemed like a place that they wanted to attack the Chargers, and they were very successful doing that. The other thing is they finally started running the football effectively in the second half. Joe Mixon ended up with over 100 yards and a touchdown. They were able to grind some clock there in the fourth quarter. So overall, a good offensive performance. And then the defense just got after Justin Herbert. I think they pressured him over 50% of the time, 4 sacks, 9 quarterback hits. And obviously Herbert gave up the ball, 4 interceptions, and that was all she wrote.
I will readily admit that I picked the Chargers to win this game, but we said in the preview episode, if anything, don't sleep on Houston's defense and its ability to make this a very tough day on the LA Chargers. You line it up perfectly. Will Anderson, 1.5 sacks, 2 pass breakups. And when the pass rush wasn't getting to Justin Herbert, the coverage was fantastic. I mean, Derek Stingley and Kamari Lassiter, 7 total pass breakups and 3 interceptions. This is, even if they aren't as capable of reaching this offensive ceiling that we saw in the second half on Saturday, that type of pass rush combined with that type of coverage can make life hell on any team that they play. That is quite a formula for success.
No, Dave, I think they're going to be a problem, whoever they face next week, with the way that defense is playing because of the pass rush. And then, like you said, the coverage behind that. They're pretty formidable defensively. And then offensively, if CJ can replicate the way that he played, this weekend, be efficient, make plays, not be concerned about turnovers as much, and just trying to create those explosive plays with his playmakers on the outside, led by Collins. And then if they could run the football a little bit again with Mixon, I think they have an opportunity to surprise some people potentially next weekend.
I'm not writing them off, because again, that is a heck of a combination, especially if you get that level of play from Stroud. But I said this right after the game. CJ Stroud, 324 total yards and a touchdown, carried the offense on his back in a big spot. So exciting to see. Stingley, 2 big interceptions. Will Anderson, 1.5 sacks, like I said. Kamari Lassiter with a couple breakups and a pick. Nico Collins, 7 catches for 122 and a touchdown. Eric, Nico is the oldest guy I just mentioned, and he's 25 years old.
Mm-hmm.
The future in Houston feels so bright, and I think we lost sight of that because this season has been such a slog. But it's so exciting, the contributions and all of these guys that they drafted to be these cornerstone type of players. They look the part, man. Like, this looks like a team that's going to be capable of winning that division for the foreseeable future. And I just thought it was really fun to see all of those guys that we have such high expectations for. They all had a big hand in dominating this game.
You bring up a great point, Dave, because this is one of the teams that we were talking about nationally as a team that we thought could compete for a Super Bowl based on what they did last season. And then obviously they kind of went through a tough stretch, during the year. CJ Stroud went through a tough stretch, kind of a sophomore slump in terms of his performance. 12 interceptions, was sacked 52 times. Again, they were having trouble protecting him. But then you watch this performance and you start to remember, oh, this was why we thought this was a team that could compete for a Super Bowl, because they have all the elements and they're young. So they're a team that we expect to be good for, 2, 3, 4 years. And so, you never know when you're going to have the opportunity to compete for a Super Bowl. You can't, just rest on the fact that you're young and you're going to have, a couple bites at the apple. So they're here now and they need to take advantage of this opportunity they have to potentially, make a little run and maybe get to the Super Bowl, surprising people.
We don't know yet if the Texans will go to Kansas City or Baltimore. We'll see what happens on Sunday to decide that. On the flip side, let's talk about the elephant in the room, the thing that I think is going to be one of the leading topics on all of the talk shows, all of the talking heads, I think, are going to be talking about Justin Herbert playing the worst game of his NFL career, in my opinion, in one of the biggest stages. There were a lot of hands in that collapse against Jacksonville a few years ago. And to be fair to Justin Herbert, he didn't get a ton of help in this game either, but when you throw more picks in a playoff game than you did in the entire 17-game season before that, there's, I don't think, going to be anywhere for Justin Herbert to hide. Just a bad day to have a bad day, as this Charger offense just melted down, particularly in the second half.
Yeah, Dave. I mean, the criticism is warranted based on his performance and the expectations, going into this game, because I think a lot of people nationally not only expected them to compete, but expected them to win this game based on how they had played throughout the year. One of the top ranked scoring defense going into it. Like you said, Herbert only had 3 interceptions during the whole season going into this. So you didn't expect him to have this turnover performance against the Texans. I think you're right. It's not all on him. I mean, no Keenan Allen, no Mike Williams. They didn't really replenish their playmakers on offense. They lean more on young guys like Ladd McConkey and Quentin Johnston, who had played, better this year, but aren't Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. So I think that's part of it. But also, when you're making the kind of money that Justin is making as one of the top quarterbacks in the league, you have to be able to raise the level of play in terms of the X's and O's. And he just wasn't able to do that in this game, which is unfortunate, because I thought the defense was kind of keeping them in. And then obviously the turnovers, continue to come and the game got away from him.
Don't think it's a coincidence. The Chargers rushed the ball for less than 3 yards per carry. J.K. Dobbins and those guys just never really able to get going. And once you fall down by a score or two in the second half, I think then all bets are off, but just never able to find any sort of consistent rhythm, any sort of balance. And I don't want to let Justin Herbert off the hook. That's not my goal here, because he did have some truly questionable throws, some questionable decision-making, but we talked about it all year. The lack of options behind Ladd McConkey rearing their head at a very bad time. I mean, McConkey, most ever receiving yards by a rookie in a playoff game, 9 catches for 197 yards. The rest of the Chargers pass catching core combined for 5 catches for 45 yards. If you're the Chargers decision makers, you got to be eyeing up T. Higgins. You got to be eyeing up guys in the draft. I mean, like I said, this is old news, but they managed to piece it together throughout the regular season, and against this caliber of competition, the wheels just kind of fell off all at once, with the exception of McConkey.
Yeah, their focus was on the trenches in the first year with Jim Harbaugh there. They wanted to get strong up front in terms of the O-line and D-line. That's understandable. But like you said, if you want to make a deep playoff run against talented elite teams, you have to have elite playmakers on the outside that can win one-on-one matchups. And that's just not the case right now when you look at the Chargers. To me, they don't need just one guy. They need 2 or 3 guys. They need 2 receivers. They need a tight end. They need a running back. They need 4 or 5 guys to really take full advantage of Herbert and his playmaking ability. And again, not to put the entire game on him to go out and win it. So I'm interested to see what kind of moves they're going to make in the offseason. I think they have some cap space. They have the ability to do some stuff through the draft. And they need to go out there and do it, because you're not going to have a guy like Justin Herbert and that talent on your roster forever.
I'm not saying this to be funny, I promise. It's very sincere, because I started to believe in the Chargers around November, like when they managed to hold on against the Bengals, when they managed to rally back against Denver. They were trailing at halftime. They rally back to win that game in the second half. They played tight with the Chiefs on both occasions. When you factor that in with just the charisma and the persona of Jim Harbaugh, I really believed that they had kind of slayed the chargering demons. It felt like, okay, maybe Jim Harbaugh has a big enough personality to push past this. And then you see them completely fall apart like this. Like, how do you think that'll dog them in the second half into next year?
Yeah, I think with Harbaugh, it's just going to take another year of kind of bringing this group together and continue to build on what he put together his first season. Obviously he had a lot of success. He was with San Francisco and at Michigan and other stops. But you're talking about the Chargers here, who have a long history of struggling in the postseason. Charging is a thing. I've covered this team for a decade, so I've seen it up close. And it's obviously going to take more than a year to kind of to get over, what they deal with on a regular basis in terms of, I guess, just confidence, really, when you're talking about these playoff situations. A couple of years ago, you had the 27-0 lead against Jacksonville. You gave that up. And then this year, Herbert has his worst performance as a pro. So at some point, they're going to have to put this behind them. And it's going to come from, Jim Harbaugh giving them confidence as a head coach and continuing to be in these situations, being comfortable in these tough situations in the postseason, and just figuring out a way to get a victory.
It's funny. We go into the playoffs every year knowing 13 of 14 teams are going to be unhappy when this is over. You're going to have to sit with that for the entire offseason. But I didn't see these exits being so disheartening for either LA or Pittsburgh. Just very demoralizing ways to go out in the wild card round. But it's Baltimore and Houston that move on. We will see who they play on Sunday, and we will have so much more wild card coverage coming up. Eric, thank you so much for your help, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Dave. Appreciate you.